debates today. This is the debate between the candidates for Rhode Island's 2nd District seat in Congress to replace Jim Langevin. The candidates will dispense with opening statements, but we will have a closer. Let's begin by order of the drawing. Mayor Fung, you go first. You are the Republican. And then Seth Magaziner, welcome to you as well. You'll take the second question or the rebuttal. First question today. YouGov CBS poll just the other day. 79% of the people questioned think the country is out of control. Mayor Fung, is that true? Who's to blame and what's the fix?
Well, what's out of control right now is the cost of living crisis that's hitting not just Rhode Islanders, but people all across the country. When we're staring down at 40-year record high inflation that's driven by a lot of the policies coming out of Washington, D.C., the overspending from our policies of our failed president, as well as, the failed policies and ratcheted spending coming out of our Congress led by Nancy Pelosi. It's fueling so much of this cost of living crisis that we're seeing at the grocery stores. When chicken, egg, milk, I shop for our family, is astronomically high. When we're facing in the short 2 years of this presidency of President Biden, a 97% increase in our home heating oil and staring down a 47% increase in our electricity prices, this is what's wrong and hitting Rhode Islanders. That's why I'm running, to make sure that we're both energy independent and reining in spending, just like what I did in Cranston.
Okay, same question, Treasurer Magaziner. 79%, that's stunning. The country is out of control. First of all, do you agree, and who's to blame, and what's the fix?
Well, first of all, thank you, Gene. Thank you, Rhode Island College, and thank you to everyone who's watching at home for caring about our country and our state. When I talk to Rhode Islanders, what I hear is people are worried. People are worried because the cost of energy is going up, the cost of food is going up, and people look at Washington, D.C., and they just see a lot of mudslinging and partisanship and not enough people focused on solutions. We have to have people in Washington who are prepared to fight for working people so that working Rhode Islanders have a chance to get ahead. And when I hear Mayor Fung blaming the Democrats, blaming Nancy Pelosi, blaming Joe Biden, what I hear is just the same old partisan mudslinging. I want to go to Washington and focus on solutions. So what can we do about it? Well, a couple of things. I've been for suspending the gas tax. I have called for taking on the oil companies and the drug companies that are overcharging people. The big 5 oil companies made over $150 billion of profits, record profits, the first 9 months of this year, while Rhode Islanders were paying $4 or $5 a gallon for gas. When I talk to Rhode Islanders, they can't believe that. They're frustrated by it. So what I want to do is go to Washington, pass a good bill that says if oil company profits are too high and they're overcharging people, they have to be required to send some of that money back to working people. Checks in the mail, rebates, real solutions to help cut down on the cost of living.
All right. Now, we have an audience here. The audience has been invited in, and audiences clap and cheer and groan from time to time. We've asked the audience to be reasonable on both sides. And I want to just implore both of you to dispense with the talking points and try to give me a straightest answer. Do you agree with the 79% of the people who say the country is out of control? And whose fault is it? Just a short answer on that.
No, it is the failed policies coming out of Washington, D.C. that has been overspending. When we're talking about a Congress that passed ARPA, and you have the number 3 Democrat, Jim Clyburn, basically recognizing that it will increase inflation. That's what's driving up a lot of, the inflation, what we're seeing at the gas pumps in the grocery stores. Our plan is to make sure that we have to become energy independent, making sure that we get our oil and gas out of our grounds as we transition over to a renewable energy. We also have to make sure we use strategic and targeted spending and rein in some of those out of control costs that are a byproduct of the monies that have come out of Washington, D.C.
I want to narrowly ask you, as Treasurer Magaziner, 79% say the country's out of control. Do you agree with that? And is your party to blame? In control, the party in power.
I will tell you what is out of control is the fact...
You didn't answer my first question. Do you agree?
Yes. No. What is out of control is the fact that the big oil companies are making $150 billion of profits while Rhode Islanders are paying $4 or $5 a gallon for gas. The big drug companies are making billions of dollars while overcharging seniors for their prescriptions. And there is a big difference here, right? I'm talking about solutions. I'm talking about cracking down on the companies that are price gouging people. That is out of control. You don't hear Mayor Fung talking about that. Why? Because millions of dollars from the oil companies and the drug companies are funding his campaign and his allies running negative ads against me. He knows that. He's not going to say anything bad about the oil companies or the drug companies because they're funding his campaign and his allies. Now, we do need to focus on solutions here. We need to move to energy independence. We need to bring more manufacturing jobs back to this country so that we don't have supply chains all around the world. We make things here in America again. There are real things that we can do, but in order to make progress, we have to get past the partisan mudslinging and blame throwing and focus on solutions. That's what I'm going to Washington to do.
Treasurer, are you going to answer my question, though? Do you agree that with the 79% who say the country is out of control, is that a yes or a no?
Yeah, when I hear that the big oil companies are making billions of dollars, that is out of control.
It's a qualified answer. He said this more than once, that you're being backed by the big petroleum, big oil guys, millions of dollars. Is that true or false?
I'm not going to sit here being lectured by, someone who's been backed by Wall Street and his dad's wealthy friends. I'm sitting here talking about the issues that are on the tables of, common everyday Rhode Islanders. And this is the cost of living crisis that is driven by not the political talk and excuses that my opponent wants to keep ratcheting up, because everyone in Rhode Island knows what's really happening. We have too much money into our system that's driving up the costs at the grocery stores, that's driving down a lot of, the incomes of many of the families, and more dollars going out of their pockets because of the inflation that's happening. This is what's the real world reality. When you're talking about 2 years, 97% increase in home heating oil alone, you're talking about seniors, people on fixed incomes that are going to be facing challenges about how they're going to feed their families, or how they're going to heat their homes, or how they're even going to pay for high prescription drug costs. I've been the only one that has been talking about plans to do this. And let's face it, he wants to divert and say price gouging. Right now, price gouging is already illegal, and it's condemned. I condemn it.
Okay.
Bottom line is this: it's the economy, and people know it, and it's the people in power down in Washington, D.C. right now.
Okay, next question. I'd appreciate if I could just get a direct answer off the top. Today, CNN, 75% of those polled believe we're in a recession already. Do you agree with that, Treasurer Magazine? Finance is your background. Are we in a recession?
Well, I think if you talk to the average working person in Rhode Island, they are seeing costs go up faster than their wages. And so for certainly, whether we meet the technical definition or not, for most working people in Rhode Island right now, they are feeling real pain, and to them, it does feel like a recession. But again, I'm focused on solutions. What we've heard from the mayor already tonight, he's blamed the Democrats a bunch of times, he's engaged in partisanship and mudslinging a bunch of times, he's attacked me and my family in a personal way. I'm focused on solutions. And it is not right when the big oil companies are making billions of dollars overcharging people. It is not right when, we're talking about too much money in the system. Listen, Allan and the Republicans supported giving trillions of dollars of tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires. If there's too much money in the system, start there. Roll back some of those tax cuts to the billionaires. And what drives me nuts, and what I think drives a lot of people nuts, is they give tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires. They're fine with that. But then you try to do something to help the working person. A couple $100s to pay for childcare, a little money to help with health care. All of a sudden, if you try to help working people, well, then it's too much money in the system. So they're fine with more money for the billionaires, for their big donors, but you try to do something to help working people, and they say, oh, that's too much. How about we get our priorities straight here? I'm going to Washington to fight for working people, not the people at the top.
Okay, Mayor Fung, I know you said you don't want to be lectured, but he's laying out what I believe some legitimate points for you to respond to. The initial question was, do you believe we're in a recession?
Look, absolutely, because that goalpost has been changing ever so often with what we are seeing right now. The Fed just raised interest rates another 75 basis points, which means many of the students coming out of Rhode Island College, my alma mater, are facing not only crushing debt, but probably an inability to ever be able to afford that starter home like many of us have. We're also facing a situation where, we have so much going on in our country right now that my opponent doesn't listen to pure, simple economists, even on the Democratic side. When you have Obama's own economist, Larry Summers, saying that what he was proposing isn't a good idea, will have a direct impact on those companies as well as jobs. That's taking not only jobs away from working people, but the better way to help working people is tackle this inflation crisis, tackle this energy crisis, because right now, more dollars are coming out of working people's pockets than are going in, no matter what we try to do.
Let's move on to a new topic. Treasurer Magaziner, you've really hit Mayor Fung hard. You say he's going to go to Congress and cut Social Security and Medicare. Just today, the Twitter team, I have it right here, said, and I'll read it directly. Republicans have said they want to reduce Social Security or Medicare. The answer to that is false. They say that's not true. And there are other articles I could show. Why are you saying that if it's demonstrably not true?
Well, it is true. So let's take a step back here, okay? So for seniors who are struggling with the cost of living, Social Security is the only chance that most of them have, right? I learned that from my grandparents who lived off of Social Security, and that check every month was their lifeline, right? And for Rhode Islanders today, that's even more the case. Here are the facts. Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader of the House of Representatives, has said, and it was quoted in the New York Times on the front page today, said that if Republicans take control of Congress, he wants to cut Social Security or Medicare. Now, he doesn't call it cuts. He says raise the retirement age. He says change the cost of living index. Those are cuts. The top Republican on the Budget Committee, Jason Smith is his name. He came here and campaigned with Allan. Jason Smith says that changes to Social Security and Medicare are one of his top priorities, and he's even willing to shut down the government in order to do it. What that means for you at home, it doesn't just impact seniors who are already on Social Security. If you're in your 50s or your early 60s and you've paid into that system your entire life and you're getting ready to retire soon, they're talking about you. So listen, you don't have to take my word for it. Take them at their own word. When Kevin McCarthy, Jason Smith, Steve Scalise today in Bloomberg, when they say that they want to make these cuts to Social Security and Medicare, I take them at their word. And the Republicans on this issue never seem to learn. They've tried this before. They haven't gotten away with it before, but we have to hold the line.
Okay, so Twitter's team today says that's a false claim. There's another USA Today quote today, it's a false claim. However, let me ask you this. He's right about McCarthy. McCarthy's been kind of open-ended on this. He has left the door open. That quote is accurate in the New York Times. In fact, a few days ago, McCarthy caused a storm with some comments about federal spending and the debt ceiling limit. It was with Punch Bowl News. He says that hasn't been predetermined. So he's right when he says there's a door has been left open.
Well, I can tell you one thing, and I can tell all of your viewers, I will never cut Social Security or Medicare. You know, my opponent wants to make this a political issue because of, you know, we all know what's going on. He's lying about my positions, whether it's on Social Security or any other issues, because he's down in the polls. You know, we all know the real story. His family doesn't rely upon Social Security. But my mother is sitting in that front row, Tan Ping. She, after 35 years in that Chinese restaurant, is retired now and relies on that Social Security check. So for the 236,000 family members in Rhode Island, like her, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to protect it. What is really happening with many of the individuals on fixed incomes, like my mother, is there are more dollars going out of their pockets because of this runaway inflation. They're paying more at the grocery store, more at the gas pumps, more to heat their home because of these 2 years of the Democrats' policies that are impacting us here in Rhode Island and across the country.
Did you tell Kevin McCarthy that when he was here with you? Did you say, don't even think about cutting Social Security? You can't count on me. Did you tell him that?
What I told Kevin McCarthy is I'm going to be a voice for Rhode Island, an independent voice that's going to work together with people to solve some of these difficult issues. And that's what he said when he interviewed with you, that he expects me to be that Rhode Island voice.
Treasurer Magaziner, he has just said before his family and before the people of Rhode Island, he is not going to cut Social Security. Are you going to call him a liar? What is it? Where are we?
He has also said that he wants to vote for the people to be in charge of Congress who have said that cutting Social Security is one of their top priorities. Listen, let's be real here. Allan can say whatever he wants about his own views. He has committed himself to voting for a Republican leadership team in Congress that has said that cutting Social Security is one of their top priorities. That is the truth. The truth is, he doesn't want you to know the truth. The truth is, he is committed to voting for Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy and his lieutenants have said that they want to cut Social Security and Medicare, and they're willing to shut down the government in order to get what they want. That is so dangerous for those seniors who are living on a fixed income, those seniors who rely on Social Security to keep up with the cost of living. They're talking about potentially not just raising the retirement age, but cutting the cost of living index so that those cost of living adjustments don't keep up as well with the cost of living. They're willing to shut down the government in order to do this. And so for Allan to say, oh, well, but that's not me, you're voting for the people to be in charge of Congress who have said they want to do this. I've said it before, I'll say it again. That is like saying you're going to put the fox in charge of the hen house. Oh, but you like hens, you're pro-hens, you're not going to do anything. But you're putting the fox in charge still. And it's crazy that you cannot gamble with people's lives that way.
Let me just be a kind of an arbiter. Let me try to be a fair arbiter of the facts. McCarthy has been sloppy on this. At one point, he said it hasn't been predetermined. And the very same day, he went to CNBC and said, I will do everything to strengthen Social Security and Medicare. We will not cut. So where do we stand? Allan, Mayor Fung, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. As you can see, it's a political issue for Seth, and he wants to make it about scaring many of our seniors. You know, I'm not sure how many more times I can say it. First of all, I'm never going to shut down government. I'm not that type of person. Never did it in 12 years as mayor. I won't do it down in Washington, D.C. Second of all, I will fight to protect Social Security. And please, Seth, stop scaring my mom. And for my mom, Ma, 你唔需驚，佢講大話，佢輸緊，我就我唔 cut their Social Security. So I can say it in both English and Chinese to everyone because bottom line is this. I want to protect Social Security for not only the 200,000 people here in Rhode Island that rely upon it, but the millions across the country, like my mom, fathers, grandfathers, all across that rely on that benefit that they earned.
10 seconds, and then we're going to move ahead.
There are a lot of moms at home right now who are watching and wondering why you have committed to elect a leadership team that has said that cutting Social Security is one of their top priorities. There are a lot of moms at home who are going to be very disappointed. Look, I want to vote for a Speaker of the House who doesn't want to cut Social Security. You have committed to voting for a Speaker of the House who have said that he will.
And he's committed to a Speaker of the House that is ratchet up spending, that is costing us. He's talking about Fox and egg. The real issue for everyone watching is the cost of those eggs. Do you realize a dozen eggs is close to $6 right now? I do the shopping. I know that price. Seth, do you know the price of a gallon of milk? This is what is the real issue that's on people's minds every single day. How are they going to feed their families? How are they going to pay that bill? This is what I'm going down to Washington, D.C. to fight for us.
Do you want to tell us the cost of a gallon of milk?
Yep. The cost of a gallon of milk is about $4.
All right.
And
I don't know where you shop. It's more than $4.
If you care about the cost of living, then you wouldn't oppose lowering prescription drug prices like that bill that passed last month. You wouldn't be putting a leadership team in charge of Congress who wants to cut Social Security and Medicare, and you wouldn't have opposed every single increase to the minimum wage in Rhode Island over the last decade. So spare me. If you really cared about the cost of living and not just your donors, your deep-pocketed donors, you would focus more on policies to help working people, not the oil companies, the drug companies, and not Kevin McCarthy, who has said repeatedly that he wants to make changes to Social Security.
We could go back and forth on this. How about
one quick point?
You could cap it, then we are going to go. Go ahead, cap it.
I'll cap it because there is one personal issue that he raised, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. You know, that is something that I would absolutely support, especially for life-saving drugs. You know, Seth sits there, talking about this issue, but he's, political talk and excuses diverting from the real issue. I know about what is going on because I've got a sister that's also sitting in the front row with disabilities who depends on insulin every single day, along with other drugs. So we know and recognize the cost of many of those drugs for her and others like her. Right. And I'd move heaven and earth to do whatever I can. But let's face it, that bill, in typical DC talk, was tacked on with everything else, including billions in new taxes that would hurt many working class Americans, middle class Americans, Mayor, and I don't support that.
Let's hold it there. The timekeepers say we're about even. We're going to move to the question of abortion, another divisive issue between the two of you. I will do my best to try to ferret out the truth. The Treasurer Magazzini, you say he's going to go to D.C. to propose a federal ban on abortion. He says that's not the case. In fact, he told me he's pro-choice.
Yeah, so Allan Fung doesn't want you to know the truth on this. I talk to women across the state of Rhode Island who are scared and are upset because after 50 years of Roe versus Wade protecting their right to make their own health care decisions, a bunch of far-right judges appointed by Allan Fung's favorite president, Donald Trump, voted to strip those rights away. And the fundamental difference between us is that I believe the decision of whether or when to end a pregnancy should be the woman's choice, not the choice of politicians or judges. Now, he can say whatever he wants, but here are the facts. 3 years ago, here in Rhode Island, there was a bill to protect the right to an abortion in Rhode Island, a bill that I lobbied for, that I supported, that we passed. He opposed it on the record. When we had a chance to do something in Rhode Island, I stood on the side of women. He stood against that bill. So the bottom line is this. If you couldn't trust him to do the right thing 3 years ago, you're not going to be able to trust him to do the right thing in Congress.
Okay, before I go to Mayor Fung, Mayor Fung has told me repeatedly he's pro-choice with exceptions. Do you accept that as a premise, as a point of departure? Do you accept
apparently
that?
The exception was 3 years ago when we actually tried to protect abortion rights in Rhode Island, and he was against it. So again, you can talk is cheap, right? And Allan has talked a lot on all different sides of this issue. He could spend the whole hour debating himself on this issue. Here are the facts, all right? 3 years ago, there was a bill to codify the right to choose in Rhode Island. I was for it. He was against it. As recently as a few months ago, he said repeatedly that he thought it should be a state's decision, a state's rights decision, even as there were girls as young as 10 years old having to cross state lines in order to get the health care that they needed. Now he's changing his position again. If you can't trust him to be consistent and do the right thing in Rhode Island, you're not going to be able to trust him to do the same thing, the right thing in Washington. But you know where I stand. Right. I stand with women.
Mayor Fung, where does he stand? Is he for late-term abortion across the board? Is he for abortion without limits? Where does he stand? You have the floor.
No.
Let me tell all your viewers where I stand, because that's the important issue. I will not ban any abortion or criminalize it, period. And the reason that we're having this debate as vigorously as Seth wants is because he's losing in the polls, every single public poll, including his own poll. So he wants to divert from my position on this and distract. Because the bottom line of this for me, and I've said it on your show, and in fact, the Providence Journal, when they profiled both of us recently and a lot of our position, showed that I was consistent now with my position back in 2014 when I ran for governor. And that's, I do respect a woman's right to make that personal, deeply personal medical decision and reserve late-term abortions for life of the mother, rape, and incest.
There was a bill in Rhode Island 3 years ago that I advocated for, that passed, that did exactly that. I was for it, he was against it. That's not leadership. Leadership is not saying one thing and doing another. Leadership is not taking one position one day and then in a different election taking a different position another day like Allan Fung does. I'm consistent on this. I have always been on the side of women. I believe that women should be making this decision, not politicians or judges. Allan changes his position every day of the week depending on what he thinks is good for him politically. 3 years ago, he was on the wrong side of this. Today, maybe he's taken a different position, but you don't know where he's going to be tomorrow. You know where I am going to be. I'm going to be on the side of women. And by the way, it bears repeating again that the person who he has committed to supporting for Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, has not only said that he wants to cut Social Security and Medicare, but has said that he wants to advance a national abortion ban. We cannot have these extremists in charge of Congress.
Okay. Mayor Fung, if he goes to Congress, he wants to I understand. Audience, we appreciate courtesy. Mayor Fung, if he goes to Congress, he wants to pass a federal, a Roe v. Wade-like legislation, although you did tell me that you will allow for state exceptions, state by state. If Rhode Island is different, you would allow for that.
That's the way it works under Roe v. Wade, too.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
No, like I said before, if that bipartisan bill by Senator Collins, Senator Murkowski, and Senator Kane comes across, I would support that.
And this 3-year bill he's talking about 3 years ago that you objected to, he said that many times. Would you clarify that for us?
We said that in the last debate, too. It went beyond Roe versus Wade.
No, it
Do you want
didn't.
to expand upon
No.
that?
How?
It did. It did because of it eliminated that Lacey Peterson fetal homicide provision.
So no, first of all, that doesn't go beyond Roe v.
Yes.
Wade. The bill specifically, and you can see this online, by the way, the bill specifically did not provide for late-term abortions. It was a narrow bill that gave women the right to choose before viability. That is well within the Roe versus Wade framework. And so again, he's dodging, he's lying, he's making excuses. The facts are the facts.
The facts are the facts. People can go read the bill. I stand by my position that I will not criminalize it or ever, support a national abortion ban. And that's where my position is, and that's where I want everyone to know.
That's enough. That's enough on that topic. We have others. We have others to get to. Crime. Crime is an issue. In fact, it registers in one of the top 3 in every poll. Crime. What would you do about crime? Mayor Fung?
Yeah.
You were the mayor, you head of the police department. What would you do about crime in America?
Yes, I'm proudly supported by the National Troopers Association upon the recommendation of the Rhode Island Troopers Association, by IBPO and FOP, the thousands of men and women that wear the blue every single day. I will provide all the necessary resources to help support their departments, whether it's for personnel, resources such as bulletproof vests or any other equipment that they need, as well as also making sure that they have adequate mental health resources, because it's a different job now in our country, in Rhode Island. And I've got a record, the only one on stage with a record of not only supporting police by providing a safe environment for our kids to go to school, but most importantly, standing with them. You remember, Gene, just a few short years ago, those riots that happened in Providence where a police car was burned and the Providence Place Mall was vandalized. The next night, they wanted to come into Cranston. I called in mutual assistance. I called Governor Raimondo and asked for the National Guard. We locked down Cranston. When they came, they saw that presence. They didn't dare come in. That's my record of safety, and that's why the thousands of men and women in blue support me in this campaign.
Right. Have you been... Treasurer, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, so everyone in Rhode Island and in America deserves to live in a safe community. And as treasurer for the last 8 years, I worked with law enforcement to make Rhode Island safer. Our office delivered hundreds of millions of dollars to fund law enforcement agencies. And I worked with law enforcement across Rhode Island in administering the state's crime victims compensation program. As state treasurer, one of my duties, one of my responsibilities, is to assist victims of violent crime to help them get back on their feet. We expanded that program to help victims of domestic violence escape their abusers. We paid for hotel room nights. We paid for rent and deposits on new apartments so that people could escape their abusers and get to safety. We worked hand in hand with law enforcement to do that. But there are some important differences here. One of the things that I saw when we were helping hundreds of victims of domestic violence get to safety is the terrible stories some of them had to tell about fearing for their lives. And here are some of the differences between us, right? A few years ago in Rhode Island, we passed a law to help victims of domestic violence be safer, called the Red Flag Law. This empowered law enforcement, if in their professional judgment they felt that somebody was an imminent risk to themselves or to others, to temporarily confiscate weapons until that person could be evaluated. I supported that bill. I testified for that bill. Most gun owners in the state were for that bill. Mayor Fung was against it. He took the extreme position in opposing the Red Flag Law. That is bad for public safety. It's bad for domestic violence. This was one of the top priorities of the state police, the Police Chiefs Association, and the Attorney General. Another important difference here is that during his leadership in Cranston, or lack thereof, we had one of the biggest police scandals in Rhode Island history, where he was personally named by the state police report that came out for inappropriately interfering in police business and undermining the work of police officers.
Let me hold you there.
He glossed over that part of the record.
Let him get a chance to respond. Mayor Fung, he did bring up the police scandal that was on your watch. He also says he's as strong as you on crime. I'll give you about a minute to respond, and we have to take a break. Okay. You'll go first when we come back. Go ahead.
I'll go quick.
Address the police scandal.
Okay, absolutely. I fixed that police department, brought in the chief from the #2 of the state police, and that department is humming along, one of the best departments in the state right now, and I'm proud of them. And I'm proud to be standing with the thousands of men and women that are supporting, what I hope to do for them, for our residents in Rhode Island, down in Washington, D.C. Seth, meanwhile, called it an honor to march with those who want to defund and abolish the police department, and tweeted about it. Clear difference between who we stand with on many of those issues. And let's face it, I've done it. I've walked the walk with law enforcement. This individual that says he wants to fund law enforcement, look, as treasurer, he's the one that's taxing Social Security on many of the seniors, in Rhode Island. 8 years, he's never gone to the General Assembly. Let's eliminate that Social Security tax. These are the political double talks that we expect from Seth Magazine.
Treasurer, you will respond. I've got to hold it for just a second. We need to take an important break. When we come back, Treasurer Magazine will be able to respond to that. I have some questions also from the students here at Rhode Island College. Stay with us. Our debate continues. Welcome back to our second district congressional debate in Rhode Island. Mayor Fung, Republican, versus State Treasurer Seth Magazine. Before we went to break, Mayor Fung, you had elaborated that you were a strong supporter of the police. You say you cleaned up the Cranston police scandal. I know you want to get back in on this. He also referenced that picture of you in front of a defund the police sign. So go ahead, this is your chance.
Yeah, so first of all, I never and do not support defunding the police. If the best he can find is that one time I walked by somebody who was holding a sign I disagreed with, that's pretty weak stuff. But I do want a chance to respond to the rewriting of history that we just heard from Mayor Fung before the break. When the state police came in and took over the Cranston Police Department, what they found was a series of scandals that Mayor Fung himself created. You don't have to take my word for it. In their own words, they said that he undermined the work of officers through inappropriate political interference. What does that mean? It means that he gave preference to police officers who were his friends and campaign contributors over those who wouldn't play the game. That undermined the work of good officers who were trying to do the right thing. You can read the whole report for yourself, by the way, right now on my website, sethmagaziner.com. You can hear from the state police themselves in their own words, how it was Mayor Fung who was ultimately responsible. Ultimately responsible is their phrase, not mine. Why does this matter? It matters because it's no secret. In Rhode Island, we have had more than our share of stories of political corruption. And it would be a bad look to send someone to Congress who was ultimately responsible for one of the biggest scandals in Rhode Island in the last decade. You can see all of this. The report, by the way, that he tried to bury, that he didn't want released to the public, that the state police put out. Okay. You can see it on my website right now.
Let's let the mayor get back in. Mayor, he's laid out a couple of things here. And he said, look, I was walking into protest. The sign was behind me. I can't help that. But more to the point, he has just quoted from that police report that doesn't sound good. Do you want to frame that for us or put it in perspective?
The perspective that I want everyone, all the viewers to know is, look, a picture says 1,000 words. And it wasn't one picture. It was actually 4 photos that he personally tweeted out from his account. It says, honored to march. It was his 4 photos that he put in, one of which said he's marching with defund the police behind him. The second photo had a picture of someone holding up abolish police, in them. So he walks and walks and walks that talk. And what he shows in those photos is exactly where he stands. He didn't just happen to walk by. He was honored to march with them. Right. I'm honored to stand with law enforcement and cleaned up, that police department.
Was the quote accurate, Mayor?
No. What I'm telling you right now is we have one of the best police departments in the state of Rhode Island. I'm proud of those men and women, and I helped transform by bringing in Colonel Michael Winquist, who's doing an excellent job in that department.
Was the quote Mayor, was the quote accurate?
What I'm saying is we've got one of the best police departments, and I was responsible for bringing in the chief to turn it around, and it's humming along.
We're moving along. We're moving along.
The state police who fixed the department. He was the one who messed it up in the first place.
Treasurer, you don't like the fact that he's making hay about this picture with defund the police behind you. He says abolish the police. Now, you have a very famous picture of Mayor Fung that you show a lot. Yeah. He went to the inaugural of Donald Trump along with hundreds of Democrats, members of Congress, and he said he was cold and he put a hat on. Yep. Are you being fair to him in suggesting that his middle name is Trump because he wears a hat?
Well, Allan Fung's support for Donald Trump goes well beyond wearing a hat, all right? Not only did Allan vote for Donald Trump in 2016, He voted for him in 2020 after 4 years of chaos and division in the Trump administration. Here's what Donald Trump did. He tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would have caused 70,000 Rhode Islanders to lose their health insurance, including people with pre-existing conditions. Under Donald Trump, he cozied up with dictators like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin instead of our Democratic allies. He put kids in cages and separated children from their parents. And after 4 years of that, Allan said, yeah, let's sign up for 4 more years. Then, on January 6th, when Donald Trump refused to accept the results of the election and incited a violent mob to try to stop the counting of votes under our Constitution, even after that, Allan said, I'm not running away from Donald Trump. Well, listen, this is not just about a picture. It's not just about a hat. This is about a consistent pattern of Allan supporting extremists, and he has committed himself to supporting another extremist, Kevin McCarthy, who wants to cut Social Security Medicare, to be in charge of the House of Representatives.
Okay. Let me just throw this out there. Several leading Democrat mayors supported Donald Trump. You know who they are. And many, many voters, thousands in Johnston and North Providence, are Donald Trump supporters. Mayor, do you want to square the two?
Well, forget squaring the two. I think Seth missed the memo from Nancy Pelosi's number 2, Steny Hoyer, who recognized I'm not an extremist and that it was a popular mayor that did the right thing. Bottom line is, what is extreme right now in Rhode Island is this cost of living crisis. That is what's happening. And I voted against Biden because of these policies. And he wants to double down on not 2 more years of Biden, but 6 more years of these policies that have ratcheted up spending, that have increased inflation to 40-year record highs, that is costing us in our basic essential foods, milk, bread, eggs, chicken, as well as at the gas pump and at our homes. We can't afford 6 more years of that, and there's a clear difference between the two of us.
The difference is
30 seconds.
Yes, the difference is Allan Fung sucks up to extremists like Donald Trump, like Kevin McCarthy, and it's not just entertaining, it's dangerous, right? Yeah. What Kevin McCarthy did was vote to overturn the election. 58% of Rhode Islanders and a majority of Americans voted for Joe Biden to be president 2 years ago. Kevin McCarthy and most of the Republicans in Congress said, well, we don't like that result, we're just going to throw it out. They violated their oath to the Constitution because they were scared of Donald Trump. Allan sucks up to these people too, Donald Trump, Kevin McCarthy. Do you think he's going to have the courage to stand up to them?
Mayor,
I haven't seen it.
Mayor, if you'd like to respond, you can. Or I have a student question for you.
Because you're owing me a little bit of time there, Gene. But, you know, bottom line is this. January 6th was a dark day in our nation's history, and I condemned it then, and I condemned it now, and still continue to condemn it. And I recognize Joe Biden as our legitimate president. And we're living with the consequences of these policies that are hurting us, where more dollars are coming out of our pockets than coming in. And that's what we need to change. And that's the main difference between these 2 candidates up here on stage tonight.
We're going to student questions. Student questions. They're our host. Want to get them in. Short answers, please. Mayor Fung, from the student, should the country move closer to a single-payer, government-managed health care system or further away?
Now, I would support a competitive healthcare system where you have the private sector, doing what's right, providing coverage. But as government, we have to make sure that we are watching what they pay for, making sure that life-saving prescription drugs are covered, that deductibles aren't too high. That's the system that we really have to be a part of.
Treasure Magazine, a short answer?
Big difference between us here. So I support the Affordable Care Act, which provided health insurance to 70,000 Rhode Islanders and lowered health care costs for all Rhode Islanders. Allan Fung opposed it, said it should have been overturned, even though 70,000 Rhode Islanders would lose their health care. I also support strengthening Medicare by capping the cost of prescription drugs, capping out-of-pocket costs, and lowering the eligibility age for Medicare as well. Allan, in contrast, not only opposed the bill to do those things, but has committed himself to electing a leadership team in Congress that has said they want to cut Medicare. We are very different on this issue. I want to have health care in Rhode Island and in America that is more affordable, high quality, more accessible. He doesn't.
You could just a quick response.
Go ahead, respond.
Here we go again, more political double talk from him and more misstatements. I have never said, just like on abortion, I've never said that. I've never said that I will overturn Obamacare. Never said it.
Sorry, let's do a fact check here. 2014 on the Newsmakers TV show on another network, he was asked by Arlene Violet, do you support Obamacare? He says, I never supported Obamacare. She said, do you think it should be repealed? He says, absolutely. 2014, Newsmakers, it's on the record, it's on the internet, but understand what that means. Not only are we seeing now that he's willing to lie and make misstatements in order to get elected, 70,000 people would lose their health insurance. Thank God we didn't listen to him back then.
Let's go ahead, Mayor. Quick rebuttal. I've got to get the second question, and we've got to move.
It's working. That system right now in Rhode Island is working. I am not going to overturn it, and I wouldn't support overturning it.
Second question. I'm encouraged. The students are paying attention. They're watching television. They're watching your commercials, and they don't like what they see. Party politics seems to take center stage in your attack ads and in your characterization of your opponent on the debate stage. It goes to both of you. Does it matter to you that you are not the role models and the source of inspiration that we are looking for? It's quite the indictment, Mayor.
Well, actually, if you take a look at my ads, I haven't thrown a single shot. My ads have stayed positive, talking about my work in a lighthearted way, about what I did in the city of Cranston, reminding people of what we did, taking a city that was hurting financially, making it one of the best cities to live in, laughing at myself, but celebrating a lot of our great restaurants, Twin Oaks, Iggy's, at a construction company in Cranston that's on a major project, for the state of Rhode Island, helping us. I've stayed positive and talked about my plans for energy independence as we transition over to renewable energy, and what we need to do to get this inflation down.
But you have allowed, and I assume encouraged, the Seth with the silver spoon in his mouth country club ads that run every night on Channel 10.
No, I don't coordinate. I do not coordinate with my super PACs.
Yeah. He just said, I don't coordinate with my super PACs. Just
the
for the record.
PACs.
Hold on. No. Freudian slip there. All right. There's nobody who watched the last half hour of this debate and thinks that Allan Fung has run a positive campaign. He attacks my family. He attacks Democrats. When you ask him what his solutions are, he just attacks Democrats some more. The typical partisan mudslinging. But to the student who answered the question, you are absolutely right. Politics has gotten too nasty. It's gotten too negative. My track record as state treasurer, I worked with Republicans and Democrats to get good things done in Rhode Island, like a historic state school construction program, helping victims of domestic violence escape their abusers. These were bills that we passed with bipartisan cooperation and support. And when on the topic of those ads, when you see those nasty negative ads that his super PACs are running against me, don't forget who's funding those ads. Millions of dollars from the oil companies who know he's going to do nothing to lower the price of gas, the drug companies who know that he's not going to do anything to lower the price of prescription drugs, and election deniers like Kevin McCarthy pouring millions of dollars into his super PACs to run negative ads because they know that Allan's first vote in Congress is going to be to put a group of election deniers in charge of the House of Representatives. That is wrong.
Let's expand on this. Yeah. Let's expand on this and talk about the characterization that each of you have made about each other. There's this notion that you're portraying him as a person with a silver spoon in his mouth, a child of privilege, who is entitled to political office. Conversely, he is portraying you as almost a relative of Donald Trump. Where is he right and where is he wrong? Mayor, you go first.
I can tell you where it's right. I didn't grow up on Papa Squash Point like he did in Bristol. I grew up in the streets of South Providence, and I'm proud of, my background, being first generation to this country. My mom, came from communist China, met my dad in Hong Kong where they got married, came over for that American dream. I'm a byproduct of the American dream. Classical high school, proud Rhode Island College graduate, then law school, coming back, fighting for us as a prosecutor at the Attorney General's office, then, 12 years as mayor of our state's second largest city, doing the right things for residents, common sense solutions, working across the aisle. That's what I've been about, and that's what I'll do down in Washington, D.C.
Before I get to Treasurer Magaziner, this notion of privilege, you mentioned Papa Squash Point. Yeah. Nice real estate. Rhode Island has elected people of privilege, including Senator Pell, the Chafees, both of them, and there's a great deal of a reservoir of affection for the Roosevelts and the Kennedys. Why is this wealth or background an issue? Why do you mention Papa Squash Point?
No, because I represent middle-class, working-class Rhode Islanders. I share in their background. I've got a mother that's on Social Security. I've got a sister that relies on life-saving drugs. I've lived the life of many other first generation that are born here or first generation coming to this country. I've got that diversity of experience, and I've shown that in my 12 years as mayor, where I've made sure I've empowered individuals within the city of Cranston, whether it's, my director of administration, first female, first Latino chief of staff, first visually impaired city solicitor. I've walked the walk and made sure that I have people that understands what's going on in our communities. That's what I'll do in Washington, D.C.
Treasurer Magaziner, he has poked at you for a life of privilege and entitlement, and I see the commercials. He mentioned Papa Squash Point. Go ahead and defend yourself.
Well, I think it's ironic but not surprising that right after we had a question about too much negativity in politics, he opened up the very next question with a personal attack against my family. That's not something that nice guys do, Allan. But
that was the question, Seth.
But let's talk about the difference between us, because there is a difference. I have spent my time in public service fighting for working people. He has spent his time fighting for his campaign contributors, the big companies that fund his campaigns. Let's look at the tape, right? I supported raising the minimum wage in Rhode Island from $7 to $8, then $8 to $10.10, and now $10.10 to $15, because I want working people to have a chance to earn a good living. He opposed every one of those bills. I supported the Affordable Care Act, which helped 70,000 Rhode Islanders get their health insurance. He opposed it. I supported the Reproductive Privacy Act in Rhode Island so that abortion rights would be protected. He was against it. I support protecting Social Security and Medicare, the Inflation Reduction Act to lower the cost of prescription drugs. He was against it. Every time there has been a big issue in Rhode Island or nationally that has impacted middle-class Rhode Islanders, I have been on the side of working people, and he has been on the side of the funders of his campaigns. This is a consistent pattern. And if you think it's going to be any different in Washington than it has been over the last 20 years, you haven't been paying attention.
All right. By the way, we are within 4 minutes from closing statements. Go ahead, Mayor Fung. Mayor, we are within 4 minutes of closing statements. Let's keep mindful of time, but go ahead.
Let's take a look at his comment about, let's take a look at the tape. The tape that I'm interested in is the ad that he just ran, where he's highlighting an avowed socialist, and David Morales, in his ad. Those are the individuals that he, supports and wants to, crowd himself with. By the way, let's talk also about the billions in new taxes that was part of that Inflation Reduction Act. He also wants to tax through the TCI, that state tax on gasoline as well as home heating oil, hitting us at the worst possible time right now. Again, there's a clear difference between what he wants to continue saying in his playbook of, words where I don't fit that mold to, what he really wants to support, and that's millions in new taxes, billions in new taxes hitting us at the worst possible time.
I think we're going to move.
Can I just real quick, because your network, Brian Crandall, Channel 10, a few weeks ago did a fact check on these ads, right? And they said, your own reporter, Brian, who's a good reporter, said that Mayor Fung's ads saying that I want to raise taxes on the middle class are false. I am for suspending the gas tax. I am for helping working people. He is for higher drug prices, helping out his millionaire and billionaire donors, opposing the minimum wage increase, opposing the Affordable Care Act. The record is clear.
You've both gone over this several times. Again, we're with about 2 minutes from our closing statements. Should there be student loan forgiveness? We could do a yes or a no on some of these. Student loan forgiveness, Mayor Fung?
Look, there's a three-prong approach I would take. Reducing interest rates, doubling the amount of Pell Grants, as well as making sure we take a look at what the real underlying cost for college educations with the degrees that are coming out. That's how we tackle, the student loan crisis.
No. The answer is no. You prefer these alternatives.
Yeah.
Treasurer?
Yeah. So I think that people who work in high-need fields, nursing, teaching, where we have shortages, where there's a public service element, should get loan forgiveness. But I also think that we need to focus on lowering the interest rates on student loans, because the federal government should not be charging 6 or 7% on these loans. And we have to make college more affordable for everyone. And we have to, not just college, And not just college.
So,
there's a lot of good jobs out there that don't require a four-year degree. We need to invest in career and technical education and apprenticeships and other types of job training as well.
Let me just jump back. Yeah. So you are for forgiveness, but only for certain students, not across the board, like
I think
President Biden?
I think if there's high need fields like nursing, like teaching.
Oh, well, that's very different than the Biden plan. Go ahead. What are the fields?
Listen, where there's high need fields. And I also think that we need to lower interest rates for everyone. We need to make college more affordable for everyone. And we need to invest not just in making college more affordable, but job training across the board.
Okay. Should we expand the Supreme Court? This will be our last question before closing. Should we expand it?
No, I don't believe in playing games to get a result that you want.
Treasurer Magaziner, should we expand the court?
The Republicans in Congress have been playing games with the Supreme Court for a long time, which is why Roe v. Wade was overturned. But if you are worried like I am about the Supreme Court, that it's become too extreme, rolling back fundamental rights that have been in the books for years, there's two things that we should look at. Number one, I think we should look at term limits for Supreme Court justices. Number two, elect Democrats, because Democrats don't appoint these crazy judges like the Republicans.
By the way, you've got... 30 seconds to closing statement.
You appoint
do you still support
judges,
term limits for yourself? Yes or no? Do you
yes.
still support? Yes. Do you support term limits for yourself? You do. All right. We're coming to closing statements by order of the draw before we begin. Treasurer Magaziner, you go first. 1 minute, please. Address the camera.
Well, when I talk to Rhode Islanders, what I hear is that people love our country and they love our state, but they're worried. They're worried because the cost of living is going up and they don't know how they're going to be able to afford to pay for their medicine or to put gas in their car. They are worried because they see fundamental rights being rolled back by extreme judges, and they see that partisanship in Washington has just become too nasty and divisive. I'm running to change that. My record as state treasurer is working across the aisle to get things done, like a historic school construction program. And in Congress, I'm going to fight to take on the oil companies and the drug companies that are overcharging people, the extremists who try to overturn elections. There's a clear difference between us here. Allan Fung has shown time and time again that his priority is his campaign contributors, the oil companies, the drug companies, and the extremists. They're not spending all these millions of dollars thinking they're going to get nothing in return. They're spending these millions of dollars for his campaign because they know that he is going to embolden their agenda of chaos and division. We cannot have that in this country. That's why I'm running for Congress, to focus on real solutions to get things done for working people, not the partisanship and the ugliness that we're seeing on the other side.
Treasurer Magaziner, thank you. Mayor Fung, your closing statement, 1 minute.
Sure. Over the past decade, the people of the city of Cranston have always put their trust in me, no matter if it was Democrats, Republicans, or independents. Not about partisanship, about bipartisanship, working together. That's because at the core of it, I'm the embodiment of everyone that's watching at home tonight. Hardworking, self-made, and quite honestly, just trying to make this state that we all love a better place. My mom, who's sitting in that front row, grew up in a small fishing village in communist China. Through the great American dream, this land of opportunity, I grew up on the opposite side of the world in Providence, learning my ABCs at Broad Street Elementary. I'm aware that I don't look like your typical, politician. I'm aware that I don't sound like your typical politician because I'm not. I'm just a man who loves this country and would be so grateful for your support to help make it a better place. And I appreciate your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Fung. Thank you, Treasurer Magaziner. Thanks to the audience, Rhode Island College, for having us. We invite you to come back at 7 o'clock live for our gubernatorial debate. Good luck to both of you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thanks.